Yes, I do. Unit 6. number
Unit
3.
1.
Unit 1. Compare the major purposes of government according to classical republicanism with major purposes according to the natural rights philosophy. When classical Republicans spoke of the office of citizen, what did they mean? Classical Republican thinkers believe that civic virtue must be learned. Therefore, all young people must receive moral education. Do you agree or disagree, and why? You may begin when you're ready.
Plato once said, "The city is what it is because our citizens are what they are." Interactions of the citizen and government forge the strength of a nation. However, the function of this relationship has been discussed on differing philosophical grounds.
Classical Republicans held that the purpose of government was to uphold the common good, even at the cost of individual rights. In the Republic, Plato wrote of a society where the common good was upheld above all else. Pericles created an Athenian direct democracy and broke down economic barriers by giving salaries of public officials to the poor. Cicero's actions showcased civic virtue when he opposed Caesar's dictatorship. French philosopher Baron de Montesquieu aimed to uphold civic virtue by separating the branches of government, protecting it from corruption.
By contrast, natural rights theorists hold that the main purpose of government was to protect individual rights, often defined as life, liberty, and property. Whereas classical republicanism aimed to look at the relationship between people and their government from a more communitarian standpoint, natural rights theorists were decidedly more individualistic. John Locke codified these basic individual rights in the two treatises on government, discussing social contract theory.
Under the social contract, one gives up certain rights when entering society so that more fundamental rights will be upheld. Under this system, authority of government is derived from the people, a principle known as popular sovereignty. Thomas Jefferson applied ideals from John Locke's social contract when stating that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
Both philosophies may be found around government. Keeping with Montesquieu's tradition, the first three articles establish separate and co-equal branches. Supreme Court cases like Hawaii Housing Authority versus Midkiff upheld the classical Republican ideal that a state, under eminent domain, may take private land and redistribute its ownership for the common good. The 4th Amendment has natural rights ideas, granting the right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search.
These philosophies also differed on the concept of citizen. Natural rights theorists held that the citizen should hold government accountable for the protection of fundamental rights. Should the government not uphold this promise, the citizen should demand change and, if need be, rebel, traces of which may be seen in the 2nd Amendment.
Classical republicanism believed that moral education was essential to creating a responsible citizenry. As Justice Louis Brandeis stated, the most important political office is that of the private citizen. When classical republicans spoke of the office of the citizen, they meant that the citizen should be politically active and hold civic virtue. Pericles' government emphasized the office of the citizen, with him stating, "We do not say that a man who takes no interest in politics is a man who minds his own business. We say he has no business here at all."
This concept may be found in documents like the 1777 Georgia Constitution, in Article 12, which mandates compulsory voting. Other activities that uphold the classical Republican concept of the citizen today are jury duty and the initiative process. Wisconsin residents have used their office as citizens to ensure the common good of the community by initiating the recall for Governor Scott Walker.
Our concept of citizens today varies very much with the classical Republican model of it. In Plyler v. Dill in 1982, it was ruled that education was a fundamental privilege, affirming that while a person may not be a citizen in legal terms, they may still uphold the classical Republican ideal of a citizen who deserves a moral education.
To ensure the common good was upheld, classical Republicans believed a moral education was necessary to ensure a functioning society, a concept we agree with.
Education is a fundamental part to the creation of a citizen. As John Locke stated, "Of all men we met with, 9 parts of 10 are what they are by their education."
Nevada and 33 other states have laws against bullying and require government and civics courses for high school graduation. A moral education is essential to ensure that the democratic American institutions are upheld by the civic virtue of its citizens.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we have some cross-examination questions we'd like to ask you regarding a question. First one I have for you is, what role does affirmative action play in this like idea and concept of citizen?
Well, essentially the concept of affirmative action is using race as a factor in making decisions for college admissions, often favoring minorities over non-minorities. How this plays a concept in creating citizenry is making sure that people who may have come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds or who may have experienced racism in the past have just as equal an opportunity to become a functioning and productive citizen to our society.
Affirmative action also applies to the workforce, ensuring that this equality and that the opportunities that the citizens get to participate in society are equal elsewhere other than education.
However, as noted in the Supreme Court case Gratzenbruder v. Bollinger, use of race in affirmative action must be narrowly tailored to achieve the university's goal in diversity, or for a business their goal in diversity.
You guys discussed moral education, that you agree with this idea of moral education. Who should decide the components of a moral education?
I think, well, when you're looking at a moral education, education, for the most part, except for unfunded mandates, falls within the state's jurisdiction. So it's important that the state legislature making rules for the school board, or the school board itself decides what the moral education itself consists of in order to keep with the educational mission that might be unique to that specific area.
If you draw a comparison between the colonies, how the legislators really reflected the ideas of the constituents, you can see how the teachers and the school district can really set those standards of what a moral education is, because they have the experience to do that and they understand what the students need.
Coming from a more philosophical standpoint as to who actually decides these morals, you can look to the philosophy of Jean-Jacques Rousseau and his social contract when he said morals and essentially government are decided by the general will and popular sovereignty. So we kind of synthesize the morals of society and instill them into the youth through moral education.
There's been a lot of debate and controversy with the case Citizens United. How does that play into this role of citizen? Does corporations have a role in this idea of the classical Republican idea of office of citizen?
Can you restate the question?
How does Citizens United change this dynamic of the idea of citizen or personhood or?
The case Citizens United?
It takes the concept, I think, almost a classical Republican nightmare to the extreme, which is individual rights all the way to the extreme, so much so that corporations are getting that. And when you have that, corporations themselves might not be upholding what the natural rights theorists would be the common good, would call the common good, and instead are favoring more towards so individualistic that they only care about themselves, and they're not achieving, Jean-Jacques Rousseau when he said the general will, or you might call it factions later.
On the other hand, corporations, since they're composed of people who have strong political opinions, do uphold the First Amendment right to petition government. So it's important that they have these equal rights, because otherwise it's very difficult. I mean, these super PACs, as they're called, are sort of a necessary part of the current election system that in order to get a person's name out, in order to get the name recognition that's really necessary in elections, huge amounts of funds are necessary today.
I disagree with my colleague only because the voice is very channeled by money, and that money representing the company is not necessarily from the constituents. So it's not. This has nothing to do with the office of the citizen. The office of the citizen has to do with being involved in the political process, not the business itself taking the money from the corporation and putting it into a candidate's campaign and making it a voice for the citizen. That's not the people. That's not the worker's voice.
You spoke about the office of the citizen. Given the low voter turnout in most American elections, is the notion of citizen too broadly applied in our country?
Can you rephrase the question, please?
Sure. Is it, in other words, do we give citizenship to natural-born citizens too easily? Is it too broadly applied, or too many people citizens, as opposed to a more narrow group of people who are actually fulfilling the office of the citizen?
I don't think so. A lot of the voter statistics, specifically towards young people, the reason that they vote, as Congressman Skaggs said, is not necessarily that they don't know the political process, but that they're afraid of doing damage to the nation by not being informed enough. So it's not necessarily the reason that they don't know and they don't participate because they don't know, it's the fact that they're afraid of the damage that they might do.
Another reason voter turnout can be so low is just simple misinformation or lack of knowledge. I mean, as my colleague said, but part of the reason for this is due to national media bias. National media outlets usually only report on national elections, so local elections tend to generally have far less voter turnout than national elections, even though to a particular constituent, the head of their, their mayor or the head of their local school board probably is going to affect their life more directly than the president or the members of Congress will.
However, also voting is only one small part of the concept of the office of the citizen. And the office of the citizen does not just have to be political, it can also be social, getting involved in your community, providing jobs, making money, taking care of yourself and others. It can also be applied in a more political sense to jury duty, which everyone has to serve if you are a citizen of the United States.
Is making money an important aspect of civic virtue?
Making money is a very, very important of civic virtue because because that money goes into taxes, which then fund that funds your community, and it also funds the national government. And you can see that welfare, because of the economy, welfare is in this country this year $619 million worth of the debt. And so you can see how giving money to the poor can actually, who don't work, can actually worsen the economy.
As the classical Republican thinker Pericles said, before a person can learn to participate in their community or in their political system, they need to be able to govern themselves. And so being able to make enough money to provide for oneself and one's family is an important step in learning that.
And looking at it from a purely economic standpoint, it's an important part of civic virtue because if you're looking at it just from the basics of capitalism laid out by Adam Smith, by making money yourself, you are employing other people and you are benefiting to the welfare of the entire community in that sense of you're creating a mutually beneficent agreement between two parties.
Does Locke's idea of an authoritarian state to promote order, security, and peace have any relevance in today's United States or in the world?
I think one place that you can see that still applies today is through acts like the Patriot Act, where, this all stems from Abraham Lincoln and suspension of the writ of habeas corpus and military tribunals during the Civil War, that during times of war, threats to national security, there's the idea that the federal government can expand their powers to respond to certain threats. So I think it is very applicable today.
Can you please repeat the question?
Does Hobbes' idea of having this authoritarian state, right, one person, giving up their rights for that one person to protect order, security, and peace, do they still have relevance today?
Certainly. If you can see in the Occupy protest, there's still the sense of time, place, and manner that's located within the First Amendment. And in the Occupy protests, these things weren't being obeyed, so there was uncleanliness and disorder out in the streets. And that's certainly when the authoritative part of the government needs to step in order to protect the public safety and the rights of others from being harmed.
In your opinion, is our government more leaning towards classical republicanism or natural rights philosophy?
I would say that our government leans more towards natural rights today. There are a lot of examples of the expansion of rights, particularly over the last several decades, starting with penumbra rights in Griswold v. Connecticut, and then this last few months, the U.S. v. Jones decision. Even though there was very significant evidence that Jones was a drug dealer of cocaine, he had done terrible crimes, and he's a really dangerous person to public safety. Procedural due process guarantees got him off, and so because of the United States' very strong procedural due process guarantees and many other guarantees that we have, I would say that it's more natural rights.
Okay.
Go ahead. Finish your idea.
No, it was long.
Finish it.
Okay, I disagree. I'd say classical republicanism is more prevalent in today's society, mainly because you've seen since basically FDR has basically expanded the role of the federal government so much to include various social programs that and economic programs that help society as a whole, and they're still in place today.
Good. If you get that, if you're about ready to answer and that stop sign comes up,
Okay.
get it out anyway.
Okay.
Okay, because no one can start after the stop sign, but if you're going as it comes up, finish the
Okay.
idea.
Awesome.
Also, make them stop you too. You know, I mean, they might mess up. Make them stop you because you're still. It's like
Don't give up.
Okay.
yeah, play through the whistle kind of idea. So
Yeah.
you got to keep going until someone says no.
Okay.
Hold on time. You know what I mean? So, and more often than not, they'll want to hear what you have to say.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's good.
Feedback. Corey? Huh?
Oh, that was really good. I thought you guys all complimented each other well, and had good arguments there. Just a couple questions on talking about compulsory voting and then how that compares to the initiative process. That's not like that's not a compulsory. That was in your testimony, I think, right?
Yeah, I think we were talking about the office of the citizen, so we're talking like
Right.
compulsory voting would kind of be like
Two different
Well,
examples.
two different examples. So
Okay.
compulsory voting is one, and then the initiative process would also be another.
Okay. So I thought you were trying
Yeah,
to
we'll make
say
that
was-
distinction a little clearer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, I figured you guys would do that. And then I doubt that was US welfare really $617 million last year? Is it billion?
It's bill. Oh, oh gosh, it's
Okay.
billion. Yeah.
I was gonna say, that's cheap. Give them well. Give it out. Yeah. No, I thought.
Where's the rest of that money going then?
I like the asking to clarify the question as well, very confident. And then as far as how you guys present yourselves, even from the dress rehearsal that we did before state, I think you're obviously in a more relaxed environment and it's not as imposing, but if you can remember how this feels when you go to, very good.
Yeah,
Don't
you
wear
got,
the bunny ears.
Yeah, we've been over this.
No, that's funny.
I thought that was really good, a lot better than last time. And, you know, I've heard the one about constitutional government 3 times now, so I picked something else. And I thought you guys did a good job with some tough questions in those cross-sects. One thing that we talked about a couple weeks ago at one of the classes that Mr. Clark and I are part of with FEC and Citizens United, the one thing that really kind of was an aha moment for me is if you grant corporations First Amendment rights, that's a slippery slope. Where do you stop? Do you start granting corporations Second Amendment rights? And where does it stop? Because if they get free speech, you have corporations now running around with their own armies because they have Second Amendment rights too. So that's one other thing. Just consider. It's like, well, where does it stop? Where does it end with this nebulous non-entity called a corporation, which Jackson was very critical of. And then I thought you guys did a good job describing the Office of the Citizen. And good quotes in the cross-sects, good case knowledge, there was opinion with fact, and you all, I think, participated equally, which is one of the key components of that group, so I think you guys really scored well in that area, so I was impressed. I was really impressed, it was a good job.
Playing off of Mr. Oaks, one of his favorite quotes that he likes to use a lot is one from Andrew Jackson about corporations and why they're dangerous.
What is it?
You can't cut their heads off. It's like what is it?
There's just no body to kill. It's like you cut the head off and then another one comes up. He just said something,
The dangerous thing about corporations, you can't.
you can't cut the head off. There's nothing to hurt.
Guys,
I just
You know,
thought I
physically.
read it, I would have been like.
So that's why he was fearful of them, because they have all these rights, but it's like if you're gonna take down IBM today, well,
Where do you start?
where do you start? Exactly, yeah.
just a couple things, and as you guys go practice, try to hold the binders up just a little bit so they're not down here. Same thing with the iPads, since you're not here with the iPads now because we don't have them. Just if you want to be like that or have your hand
That was
underneath
my
it.
suggestion, we can go.
So just something here so your body language is more up and not down when you're reading. And I know you can have your finger, and if you want more space, just print it out so you can keep your eye on it easier. I know it's a different transition, but bigger font, whatever it is that you need to do to fix those things. So I know that's why we're doing kind of things we are to practice those. One big thing, and Alex, you're the one who said it. You said that something like it has to solve this. You backed it up into a corner that.
What did I say?
I was on the question, how should we define citizenship? In terms of Mr. Oaks' question about voting and all those things, and you said something like,
Oh, the jury duty?
Yeah, everyone has to be. Yeah, that's
Oh,
exactly
like
what
if
it
you're a citizen,
You
anyone
have
can
to.
be called. What I meant
You
is
ha-
anyone can be called.
So you just gotta be careful because not everyone has to. I still haven't been called to jury duty.
Yeah, but I meant anyone can be called. Is
Just
what
just
I-
make sure
okay,
you be
that's
careful
not
on those
phrasing,
things. Yeah. The superlatives get people backed into corners.
Yeah.
But you guys did a great job of balancing your answers. A little heavy on Lucas and Paulo, but it's still, for the most part, very balanced. I mean, you guys did a good job of not answering questions when you didn't have to, and picking up on other things that people didn't say.
Examples, were they?
I mean, I got it written down. Lots
Yeah,
of
like
examples.
what happens, like, because I just found that they kind of answered the question and then that was it.